In this video, we are going to look at interesting records to happen in the New York metro area. And there's a point that I'm trying to prove in this video, that it's harder for Central Park to set a record than anywhere else, mainly due to its longer period of record. And we aren't just going to be, we aren't just going to be talking about every single major daily record, because those just happen too often, especially when you really broaden the scope of it. Rather, we are going to be looking at significant records to have affected our area. And by significant, I mean even a single daily record low won't be enough. We are instead going to focus on records that actually got more attention, mainly due to their rarity. And I'm going to discuss why Central Park couldn't make the record, because it might not have just been because of its longer period of record. There might be other reasons behind it, like just simple geography, but it could have also been due to that. But the main record that Central Park set on February 1st, well, there were actually two records that were set. Every single site in the New York metro area had their warmest January on record, including Central Park. But the record in Central Park was by a very tight 0.3 degrees. Only one other station, Newark, was around in 1932 during the previous record warm January, although Newark managed to break its record by a more comfortable 2.0 degrees. The main reason for this is that it was warmer in Central Park compared to Newark in 1932, but not in 2023. And Central Park did have a few chilly days throughout January 2023 that made it a real nail-biter. Everywhere else managed to break the record more comfortably, but in most cases they were not around in 1932 for the previous warmest January on record. This also meant that January went from having the oldest, longest standing record for warmest January to the newest. The oldest record that still survives now for warmest month is back from March 1945, which had a close call in 2012, but was able to prevail over 2012. Now, February 1st also set a record at only two sites, Central Park and JFK. The reason why those two sites were able to set records was for their latest first measurable snow. On December 12th, a small storm did ride up through the area. There was a bit of snow in my backyard. I don't know how much because we don't have official weather stations here, but I could tell that it was from the NWS records that 0.8 inches of snow fell in Bridgeport, 0.4 inches of snow fell at both LaGuardia and Islip, and 0.1 inch of snow fell at Newark. But only a trace fell at Central Park and JFK. January saw only a trace of snow throughout the entire metro. February 1st did see more consistent snow, as Central Park finally saw 0.4 inches of snow, whereas JFK saw 0.2. There was 0.3 at Newark and Islip, and 0.2 at LaGuardia, and only a trace at Bridgeport, meaning that nowhere in the New York metro area has seen a full inch of snow. This could make it our least snowy meteorological winter on record if it persists until March 1st. While we are tracking a system on March 1st, we're still not sure if it could actually produce snow yet. There's also a small system February 25th and the 26th that we're monitoring, and if any accumulation falls in Central Park, it would have to, at the very least, settle for a tie. However, we don't know if that snow could fall in Central Park, or if it's just not going to snow, or if it's not going to stick long enough for it to actually accumulate. Although Saturday is looking cold, so it shouldn't really have that much of a problem accumulating. We just don't know what's going to happen in, with the storm, and we don't know what our winter's fate is going to tell us, whether or not it's going to be a very sad winter, or whether or not winter is going to try to make a surprising late recovery. I mean, both of those are really possible. Anyway, before this, there weren't a ton of notable records. I'm going to try to exclude holidays as much as possible, but if I am going to include a holiday, I wouldn't exactly want to include like any holiday. I want it to be like a major mega holiday if I was to include a holiday. I don't like including holidays because of the fact that there's like this luck of the draw situation. But in some cases, it's necessary to mention it because some holidays just really have their names stand out. That being said, there's one firm rule. The holiday must be on a fixed day. There will be no holidays included in this video where the days can wander around. It must be fixed. So, Christmas Eve is really one of the holidays that really fulfills this criteria. But I'm going to prove something to you. The highs were 16 or 17 throughout most of the metro area, and they all broke daily records. But the high of 15 at Central Park was not able to set a record for the coldest high on a date, which still maintains itself at 13 degrees, and it was back in 1872 as well. 1872 was before any of the other sites existed, and it was the 4th year that we kept weather at Central Park. That is the main reason why Central Park was the only one to not break the record. They had the longest period of record as a result of this. And oh god damn it, just as I start filming this video, I realized I made a mistake. Okay, February 16, 2023, we do have to discuss this. Islip set a monthly record at 71, Bridgeport set a monthly record at 68. Central Park failed to set even a daily record as they hit 70, and they were 8 degrees off from their monthly record. So how come Islip and Bridgeport hit their monthly records? Well, 2 reasons why. First of all, Islip was fundamentally in one of the warmest areas, and even Bridgeport was in a warm area too. The warmest areas were on Long Island and on the south shore of Connecticut, which is weird because of wind off the water, which normally can constrain a location. I remember on May 21st, in order to escape the warm temperatures here in where I live in, Plainview, where it was 90 degrees, we went to Jones Beach, where temperatures were held down to 72 degrees, which was a lot more comfortable. So I can definitely say that usually the shore, and especially the south shore, really gets this cooling effect more than the north shore gets the cooling effect. But winds off the water were not strong, and they were strong when, Central Park did break their February record. But it's not just that. It's also the fact that Central Park has this long-standing period of record, and it's gotten warm in February multiple times in the past that could have been opportunities for Islip and Bridgeport. Even, it's a combination of the 2 factors in this case as to why Central Park was so far off from their monthly record, and yet the monthly record was broken at Islip and Bridgeport. So, anyway, going back, throughout the months. November 7th, 2022 is a date that has to be mentioned. Central Park's high of 77 failed to even break a daily record, and if you watch my video on November 1938's weather, you'll understand why. However, Islip and Bridgeport managed to break monthly records. 80 at Islip, 79 at Bridgeport. For Islip, this could very easily be a case of the lack of a long-standing period of record because of November 1st, 1950, when temperatures soared to 84 at Central Park. But Bridgeport was around for that, as their records go back to 1948. So they were around, and they only hit 77. That's also a case of relative geography, as Central Park temperature was actually constrained by, some shade, which did not happen at some of the other sites. By the way, I kept repeating that LaGuardia had the 80s during this event. It really wasn't. It was JFK. We also understand that there were warm winds blowing off the water that also helped. This was mainly because while October was below average in Central Park, it was actually above average through the rest of the metro area, and it had been a warm period in general, thus allowing the ocean water to be warmer than normal. So that was that. Now, when was the last notable record before this? Well, it was the month of August. August became the warmest on record at Newark and Islip. At Central Park, it became the third warmest on record, behind 2005 and 1980. All sites were around in 1980. So what gives? Well, what gave was the fact that Long Island was actually kept warmer than Central Park in some instances. Islip only had one day that had a high that was below 80 degrees in August, whereas in Central Park there were 3 such days. The same logic also held true at Newark. Newark is in a bit of a bad area, as the temperature thermometer is kept in between an airport runway and the New Jersey Turnpike, I-95, which does help to inflate temperatures a little bit. Nonetheless, you could see how in some of the other months there were more cool downs, and a lot of the cool downs that did affect areas were, in fact, at Central Park. Fun fact, though, Islip dipped down to 59 degrees on August 14th, which is warmer than the entire low temperature in the previous August. That being said, however, Central Park was at a balmy 66 that night. But it does go to show you that you can still have some cool below average days and be a record warm month. Not every record warm month is going to have above average temperatures on every single day. It's just like about the intense warmth, the record and near record warmth. Speaking of which, July was also the driest July on record at Newark, New Jersey. And as far as July 20th to 24th, that broke a record at Newark for the most consecutive days of temperatures exceeding 100 degrees. So yeah, it broke 100 degrees every day from July 20th to 24th, even when thunderstorms plowed through on July 21st, which I think might have actually broken a heat wave at Islip, I'm not sure. Islip's warmth was not as notorious in August as it was in July. I mean, it wasn't as notorious in July as it was in August, that's what I meant to say. Now, June was not a record-breaking month, like, at all. There weren't really any records to be broken in June. It was a tamer, more moderate month. May also, it really only had the capabilities for small daily records. It couldn't have broken major records. By the way, if you do want to know more about second and third place, I could make a video on this, but in this video I'm going to try to say as much the first place as possible, unless there's an actual reason why it wasn't a record, because in some cases it could be a bit of a surprise. But I am going to try to stay away from second and third as much as possible. But if you do want to learn about a second or third place, you can leave a comment on this video, and I will make a video on it if it's requested. It will take some research, though. But, what about April? Well, April was more of the same. And in March, while I might have had that legendary cold snap on March 28th, it was only daily records that were broken. And the more important fact is that it couldn't be the latest freeze on record. The latest sub-freezing high. If it was the latest sub-freezing high, it will be a record notable enough for me to say it. Caribou, Maine had their latest in-calendar date with a high that was below 50 degrees, when the high only reached 49 degrees on June 19th. I would mention that if this video is about Caribou, Maine. But it isn't. But I did want to give you an example of how the latest date for something I would mention, even if it wasn't notable in any other way. As long as people, the press was still reporting on the fact that this was the coldest temperature so late in the year. But that wasn't the case. There were colder temperatures in April and later on throughout March. Conditions like this are not that rare. And honestly, Central Park should be lucky to even have the record, because if it occurred on some other days, it would have failed to have broken the record. I'm exhausted. I don't want to make this video anymore. but I am. February 23rd tied the monthly record at Iceland for February at 68, and maybe also when it hit 67 at Bridgeport, that also might have tied the monthly record. And if I said daily, I meant monthly. I know that the monthly record was broken at Bangor in Maine, but that's also Maine. This video is not about Maine. Get that out of your heads. Central Park's high of 68 failed to even set a daily record because of a high of 72 that goes back a bit. It goes back before, again, Islip really had weather data. But on the other hand, Islip was confined by winds off the water when legendary warm-ups happened, like in February 2018 or even on some other times. By the way, for for February 16th, I did forget to mention, February 16th, 2023, I did forget to mention how LaGuardia had a low of 54, which actually tied for the warmest low temperature at LaGuardia ever in February. And considering the warmest low in Central Park occurred in February 2017, there's not really any bias in that. The low in Central Park of 56 was the second warmest on record for February. Okay, now we get into the nitty-gritty. Or lack of, because February and January, not that much to dissect, except on January 29th, a record-breaking blizzard struck Islip. 23.5 inches of snow in a single day became their snowiest day on record, topping January 23rd, 2016 by 0.1 inch. This was actually because of the way that the nor'easter went, because it only dumped 7.3 inches of snow in one day and 8.3 inches in total on Central Park during the course of the storm. So that was because the storm was positioned further east. Central Park's biggest snowstorm on record was from January 23rd, 2016, when we had 27.5 inches of snow. Although we don't exactly know what the snowiest day at CPK was, but we assume it was, January 23rd, 2016. That's just because January 24th, 2016 also had some lingering 0.7 inches of snow. Whew. Oh, and notice I just said lingering when we haven't even had 0.7 this entire winter except at Islip and Bridgeport. Just wanted to point that out there. Now, 2021 was an anomalously warm December throughout the metro area. But because of 2015, there was no way it could ever break through that to try to set a monthly record. There's just no way. It can't happen. And while some parts of the metro area were like in the second and third driest in December and in November, they were not record dry, even though they definitely came close. The combo in November and December was the driest on record, even at Central Park. But it's not a notable combination because they're in different seasons, and we only talk about records in this way when they're for an entire season. If we're going to group months together, we don't arbitrarily group random months. That's not how it works here. And if we were to arbitrarily group random months, we would arbitrarily group a random pair of 3 months, not 2. October did become the warmest on record at Newark, New Jersey, but it was only 6th place at Central Park. Central Park had this for 2 reasons. Number one, it was warmer in Newark because the warmest October on record at Central Park was 2017. But you also have to realize Central Park had very warm Octobers in years like 1947. Oh, and Newark existed back then. So I think it's more so the first reason. I keep forgetting that Newark goes all the way back to 31. That October is actually interesting because it managed to frost on October 1st, and yet still become one of the warmest Octobers on record. And that was mainly because of the fact that it was warm after the frost. But yes, 36 degrees is the coldest it's ever been so early in the year. And it happened, and in a high that they also warmed up to 60, which, while still well below average, is not as bad as, had it been stuck in, say, the 40s. Heading back through our time machine, September 2021 became the wettest September on record at Newark, New Jersey. Both Newark and LaGuardia had their wettest days on record, with 8.41 inches of rain at Newark and 6.8 inches of rain at LaGuardia. Bridgeport also had the wettest September day on record, with 5.77 inches. Central Park at 7.13 inches, but this only became the 5th wettest day on record. And it wasn't the wettest September day on record, and this is because of September 23rd, 1882. No one else was around for this, but Central Park clocked in 8.28 inches of rain on a single day, September 23rd, 1882. Temperatures were stuck between 55 and 66 throughout the course of the day, and it was well below average, but it was just this pouring rain. The rain that was in September 2021 was obviously from Ida, and it caused a few dozen deaths. We don't know the impacts of the 1882 tropical storm, and it's a lot less well known because it's from 1882. But it was the wettest day on record at Central Park, and that we do know for a fact. A lot of places saw nearly a foot of rain from the system, and Central Park's total was 10.62 inches of rain because of some rain that occurred in the previous days. So, yeah. And I bet that the ground did not look that brushy. Okay, in any case, going back from Ida, August 2021 and July 2021 really did bring on the heavy rain, but in none of those places could it dominate themselves as the wettest July on record. And that's why we really can't include it. June 2021 did set a notable record when the high hit 103 at Newark. That's a new record for the warmest ever June temperature at Newark. At Central Park, the high only hit 98, which was not even a daily record. The record high at Central Park for June is 101 degrees, and it was set, at least in one case, back in the 1930s, but it was when Newark was still around in 1934. A big reason for this is, again, the fact that it's in a horrible central location, and this is when people began to figure out that, yes, Newark is in a bad location for its temperature sensor. That was actually a big reason why Newark was able to break the record, where Central Park failed to even set a daily record, though it came close to setting a daily record. Okay. Now, May 2021 was notable for Memorial Day weekend, but remember the rule, it's not fixated, it's not constant. And while the high of 51 at Central Park was on May 30th was the coolest so late in a year, that was not what people were talking about. As such, it gets completely omitted. So pretend you never heard that. And there was really no other notable records to be had in May 2021 or April 2021. March 2021 did not fall on a major holiday and did not break any monthly records, so we omit that. February 2021 did become the snowiest on record in northern New Jersey, as analyzed by Rutgers, and even though it is monitored by NWS New York, it was not the snowiest February on record at any NWS New York official site. So that gets scratched off the list. There weren't really that many notable records for a while in our area. But November 2020 did become the warmest on record at Central Park and at a few other sites in the metro area. Not exactly sure which sites it was the warmest at. I think Newark was one, and I can't remember the third. In some places, they were beat by November 2015 because it was close. November 2015 also barely beat the record for November 2001. So there's a ton of competition for the warmest November on record, and that's the big reason why it wasn't a consistent record. October did not set any notable records, nor did September. August, I don't think it did. It might have. I don't exactly know. I have this inkling that was the warmest on record. That I have to look up for somewhere in the metro area for the summer of 2020. I do know that July 2020 did become the wettest July on record at Newark, New Jersey, which actually surprised me. But then again, seeing as how rain was able to target Newark and miss like Central Park, that plus the fact that Newark has a shorter period of record, because I'm pretty sure there were wetter Julys in New York City's past that were from longer ago. But then again, I can't confirm that. Now, May gets a big shout out. May 9th, 2020, Central Park sees its coldest temperature in May since 1891, when the temperature hit 34 degrees. The low of 34 JFK tied a monthly record, and at 36 at LaGuardia, it broke the record. I was surprised that here there weren't more records being set, given how, these sites were not around in 1891 when Central Park had its only ever May freeze. But then I learned as to the reason why. The big reason why is because Central Park also has the urban heat island effect. So plenty of chilly days in May that were cooler in the suburbs were not quite as chilly in Central Park. And in this case, it managed to penetrate through. By the way, Central Park saw tied for its latest trace of snow on record on May 9, 2020, tying with May 9, 1977. And I think this was consistently the latest trace of snow on record throughout the metro, or tied for it at least. But then again, I can't exactly totally confirm. April 2020 was way too bland to set any records, and the blandness did make it one of the chilliest Aprils since 1970. March 2020, again, could not set any records, and ew, this vegetation is so goddamn dry. February 2020, the first ever snowless February at Islip. Now, Central Park did manage to see a snowless February, a totally snowless February, back in 1998, but it does make sense why Islip, could have seen flakes, and then flakes avoid them in 2020. So this was actually mainly due to the pop-up hit-or-miss classic as to how Islip saw this. It's the snowless February and not everywhere else, because there were only traces of snow throughout the metro, and it was, again, a classic hit-or-miss. January 2020, also the highest ever January temp at Bridgeport, when temperatures hit, I think, like 69 degrees in January on the 10th, or was it the 11th? I don't know. The main reason why this was possible at Bridgeport was because normally they're not as warm as Central Park can get in January. They were around for some of Central Park's warmest January days in 2007 and 1950, however. And that I do want to point out. Okay, so having moved alongside there, December, November, skip, October did have a very notable record being broken at LaGuardia. Their warmest ever October temperature, not just at LaGuardia, but tied for the hottest New York temperature in October, when it hit 95 degrees. 95 degrees. That tied with Danville, New York back in 1927 as the hottest October temperature in New York. 95 degrees. Islip also set a monthly record at 89. And I'm not sure about other sites, but there were probably more records being mingled in there. Central Park's high of 93 was 1 degree tie from tying the record from October 1941, when Islip was not around, but LaGuardia was. It was LaGuardia's second year of weather reporting, though, which, again, could have justified the discrepancy. But I'm willing to say that LaGuardia was legit. But because Islip was not around back on October 5th, 1941, that one's a bit more questionable, in my opinion. Oh, and speaking of October heat, October 17th, 1938 marked the latest date Central Park has ever managed to reach its way up to 90 degrees. And I do find it interesting how it occurred before that very wonky November. The dryness of September 2019 was not record-breaking. I I think July 2019 did see the warmest low temperature in Bridgeport, but Central Park's warmest overnight low temperatures were like in 1903 and 1908, back when, again, there was, you know, no other stations. Although it was also said again in 2011 when it might have been tied at Bridgeport. I don't know. Oh my God. Now, at this point in the video, we do have to kind of do a bit of a fast forward. I do have to do a bit of a fast forward to talk about what, to really just begin to emphasize some of the more notable stuff. So, November 2018 became the snowiest November at JFK Airport. And it was the snowiest in Central Park since 1938. There was not a lot of snow around. There were not a lot of stations around in 1938. It was just Central Park and Newark at that point. That being said, a lot of other stations failed to see this, mainly because of how the November 15th storm dynamics worked. Bridgeport had a snowiest November back in 2012. Just after Sandy, in fact. And I mean, it's just like that kind of stuff. April 2018 failed to be the snowiest April anywhere thanks to the consistent 1982 blizzard. Although Central Park was 8th and a lot of the other stations were medal-worthy. Bridgeport had its second snowiest April on record. March became the snowiest record on record at Islip. The snowiest March at Islip. The reason why it was like that there and not Central Park is because Central Park's snowiest March was in 1888. And Islip, I'm pretty sure, to beating the record too with that great blizzard. That and the way that the storm dynamics worked, more snow was sent over to Long Island and especially at Islip in March. JFK had a snowiest January on record in 2016, mainly because they were hit harder by that insane blizzard. And, you know, that's just about it. I will say the coldest ever February temperatures were well realized at Bridgeport in February 2016. But, again, not around for 1934 and that legendary stuff. Although -6 degrees is, you know, interesting. Okay. No more real records here to talk about, and I think it's time for me to go. Oh, crap, February 2018. That's a record, that was the warmest February record at Central Park, but it was not consistent. 78 at CPK, 79 at LGA, 80 at Newark were monthly records.